fetching the data is called will query your stuff, but there are also resolvers that custom named like to your scheme, like you have a product resolver. A product resolver can have its properties that will grab data, allow you to create this relational connection. So a resolver essentially just a place where your GraphQL is talking to the server. That's the best way to describe. And then a mutation. We talk about how you get data. You can pass an argument to be able to, but a mutation is want to push data. It's just like a REST API. You can get data, you post data to the server, and that's the post is just called a mutation. What those things do update data in your backend. Your resolver is going to be able to specifically handle this data to be before Apollo. The really or now. The Apollo is when you do mutation, you automatically fetch the data from the client. But yeah, it's makes working with, but you change your data automatically, give all the data in your APIs. So GraphQL mutation for me replace any sort of time I'm talking about to the database that changes the data. One other cool thing Apollo says refetch is you have the ability to modify the cache meaning that let's say you are creating an item and building an online store. When you create an item that's for sale, I want to immediately show that when you hit that item to the round trip to the server could take a second. I don't want that lag. Apollo allows you to immediately inject that things into a cache, and it will also update the anything like that were created on the server that need to be pulled in the client side. Just taking stuff you don't want to do manually being for you. The reason why use something like Apollo, some sort of graphical play Apollo really whatever. Yeah. We should also that Apollo can be used with anything. There are adapters called and uses Apollo React to use with, but you can use with any JavaScript library adapters for which is a great. Nobody is unstuck in React whatever. Exactly. Yeah. So the resolver part. Let's talk a little bit about the server component of GraphQL overall in my experience Apollo. So what GraphQL essentially does to the server is it collects your schema, right? Your schema defines all of your data as well as all of the queries except the mutations, what they said. That's sort of an entire API with the schemas. You have your resolvers, you have your schema, you have your resolvers, your query, that kind of stuff. It collects all this. What Apollo does essentially just into a query server and queries the server. You just simply need to have on your client side that connecting to the Apollo server. So the Apollo server basically just collects your stuff in that have that data available. It connects via the client side. All your stuff is available. It's all available called client side. One hookup instead of having hit a specific URL here and there, just one hookup into Apollo or GraphQL there, you have access to your data. Yeah, exactly. We should also say that I have using BART. It's just great. Proper GraphQL. You don't necessarily have to be using Apollo on the front end. Is that right? It's actually a good question. It says open source GraphQL server. It seems to me it will make that available. That's the beauty of a GraphQL. If you use on, you're not doing anything different. Any of that GitHub has GraphQL APIs. You hook up directly to GitHub APIs and a special implement to use Apollo. That is pretty nifty. I should also say one thing I did. This is where I create schema for my MongoDB, recreating almost exactly schema for my GraphQL. There is a little bit of duplication. You necessarily want to one mirror your database to actually follow facing APIs. You don't want to necessarily expose all the necessary data. There are some package out there will take your MongoDB schema or whatever schema you have in your Mongo database, automatically generate a schema for GraphQL. For the equivalent, you have a string in MongoDB, a string in GraphQL. It's not exactly the same time. You have to sort of mirror what is equivalent to what is in your existing database. One of the things I like most about is that I was confusing as well. I have to define two schema paste. Your public face API is different. I love about Apollo and GraphQL have these APIs, not thinking of my data as while the data goes into the schema, it comes to me. You should think of like what data do I have actually need. You can write these custom resolve on types that can do things for you. At backend of your server call, you don't have to client side. For instance, let's say I have a user, right? You want to check to see on the client side for various reasons. Is this person bought? In my case, with a tutorial, has bought a tutorial. This just for client side, any sort of data just changes to their views. But let's say I want to know, I can do all of them, copy it on the server while the customer resolve a custom time. When I hit my query, give me the user email and tell me if they bought this course. And that's in my query. I don't have to do did I pay on the server side. I don't care about any of that. Hey API, did they spite? The boolean value is stored in the data computed by the server itself in that query. Instead, exactly, I'm a big fan of not storing data that you can necessarily compute on the fly. Definitely beat me in the past when it's, but definitely a huge there. You do not care. You just straight up boolean or calculate in the backend. It's not necessarily mute in your database. I initially thought it's silly I have to do this twice. You can compute things on the fly from 2 or 3 data sources. For example, the coupons in my case is stored in a JES file or JSON file. My custom data is stored in my MongoDB. Some other data may store in the GitHub. It doesn't matter whether it's memory, external API, or database. Just tidy it up. A single payload. You don't have to worry about fetching all of the different pieces on the client. Here is a little world example. A big impact is small impact is super convenience facts there. It stores its email under an array in emails. Instead of that array of email is objects with properties, whatever. Let's only care about the user's email. Don't collect multiple emails. Instead of having query at the user, you look inside the array, gets the property of address. All of that, I can have the API just return the first type from the API, property address, query, give me the user and the email user instead of an array full of objects. The property I'm looking into is one more way that complex to your code on the front end. No caring about user.email, whatever. I just make first. Let's take a quick break talking about our sponsors. Like Galaxy Car, but it's what's the end of tax day for young Americans? April or something? Pretty earlier. Yes, I was always his kid in my field not have that. Yeah, I'm always waiting for a charitable receipt. The last that coming February, March. Once they come with my FreshBook Expert, just super nice. It's not a pain in the butt anymore. Almost sad eyes. Alright, we'll keep talking about the GraphQL here. What we were gonna talk about some interesting, the new thing that GraphQL they will see in some ways, maybe like content folder, something as well. You don't have to worry about the server side of your application and your component. You have to what you worry GraphQL client. Some of these really cool projects is really like this isn't the same. The Gatsby static site generators read all of your GraphQL queries and run and build a static site for all sorts of platform, all sorts of bring in a day for breaking how I do it in my Gatsby tutorial series, where you query a markdown files with GraphQL and generate a style site for you. Sort of exciting things. Static site generator, something like that. Static site generator, pretty damn straight in my opinion. Another one I'm pretty excited about. Big fan of WordPress. People are not a big fan of WordPress on clients that use WordPress or maybe such an interface to be able to add your files, upload the images, all sorts of stuff. WordPress does a pretty good API. The WP GraphQL seems to be fairly active, pretty serious for the last. I've been working for about a year or now. It's pretty neat because you are being able to using WordPress a headless CMS in the backend. You can use the GraphQL API, just pull in the specific data that you need from with advanced custom fields, advanced custom post files. I have played with it a little bit here and there for what I want to redevelop a website. I still want to stay on WordPress. Got a lot of content in there. Years and years blog posts, speaking engagement, but I would like also have a really slick single page website that have animation, everything like that. I'm pretty excited about this bringing over to us. This I have actually this sweet spot we talked about before. We like so many sites built in WordPress, we can benefit from a whole new front end works right now. There's so many, I don't know, different ways to do it. There seems like brilliant things to building and hate with a GraphQL was work with the customer in the cache. Seems really a cool ways modernized site, build some front-end frameworks. Yes, exactly. Kind of IP website are being rebuilt right now. The question, do we use React or Gatsby, whatever? Do we go the older ephemeral? I don't know. Like obviously, some huge use case for regular WordPress. If you got what price you want to build in something a little bit more interactive, this will be very good for you. Yeah, super cool. On the same sort of lines of clients liking pretty interfaces that will be able to work with your data, seems like things like that. New Service Graph CMS, which aim to be a modern CMS backend, so basically the same as their server, and it's really super slick. The interface is really slick. Add your new stuff in there with the GraphQL APIs that you can use to actually build up for front end. If you don't want with server side, Graph is a really pretty sweet option out there. It's pretty darn high. I really like this sort of backend as service for you, GraphQL, but it's kind of neat. The sponsor today was if you simply just building from front end as well, when you need a web backend in some cases to a traditional server or serverless to require you to code interface the database. You want some freaking content to a database, you do not worry about it. They're pretty excited to see all these different services are popping up. Absolutely. Graph CMS is not open source. Is that right? I don't think it is. It might be open source version of it. I'm not quite sure. I feels like there is something about it. I would say that definitely software as a service. Let me see here is GraphQL CMS homepage, their GitHub. Very well maybe moving really quickly right now. They are developing under the hood before it's open source. It's what happened before Prettier was developed and wrapped and then was open source. The author of so much faster with a lot of how we all know how exhausting to manage it, especially for a popular project to manage they may come open source. One point. Speaking of being open source, there is another huge one in the space called GraphQL. It's fun and hilarious. What it is a service where you sign, you make your schema backend interface do a via command line, or you can just use the amazing GUI on the backend. I want to create a item. In the item will have a description, a price, and the number, array of the string of. I also want to have a category. A category is another item. I can link this to in my relationship. I want to query the latest 10 items. I can also populate the category's description as well. It's pretty neat because now if you want to build something or something even bigger, you can just use GraphQL as your entire backend to hold all of your data. They has exposed all of the different methods that allow you to pull data from it. You can sort your data, export, you can update